There, okay.
It's been a great week, a great weekend. I've been pretty excited. I recognize a lot of faces from the design sessions that we had. We had 7 topic sessions. We had an open house. We had lots of Zoom calls, lots of one-on-one meetings as well. Before that, we had over 1,000 people who have been involved in this project, which is kind of exciting. It's been especially exciting for me to dig in on these topics. Like I said, there were 7 topics. None of them were, going to be solved in 1 hour on Zoom. When we talk about things like housing and transportation and filling storefronts. So, but we made a ton of progress, and the designs. I don't know if you've seen the sketches and ideas that have come out, but they're all really, really exciting. Design week was only a few days, but it's been over a year in the making. It's been a ton of work that's gone into it. We had over a dozen community connectors who were quick to raise their hands and offer to help get the word out to the community, which was no small feat. So thank you to all of them. And thanks to the project team here in Freeport, who has put in a ton of hours working on this and reworking on them as COVID changed our plans. Snowstorms changed our plans, but Chip Gray and Alex and Traversato and Tommy Whitney did a great job connecting us to everybody in town. We couldn't have done it without them. Caroline Pelletier and Cecilia Smith were kind of linking us to Town Hall, and they're actually still linking us to Town Hall, shuttling some stuff over from Town Hall for tonight. And Mary Davis, who's also busy bringing things over, has been incredible in just keeping us all on track. It's been a great team to work with, and there's still a lot of work ahead of us. The principal group has been our partner through the project. They are here. Their work is not done tonight, but this is a big moment. They've done a lot of work, and a lot of it you see as pictures and sketches on a board, but there's a lot more that goes into that. It's not just about drawing pretty pictures. It's about years and years of experience and the ideas that they brought to us from other towns, and the ideas they've brought and said, don't try this, it's not going to work, because we tried it in other places. So that's been really inspiring. And you'll hear tonight, I'm sure you've already met Russ Preston, who's here, who's kind of leading the charge. The enthusiasm that he brings to the project, I would say it's infectious, but maybe I'll pick a different word. But it's great to be around. And he's got a great team, people you've probably already met if you've been on the Zooms. Logan, Mandy, Carlos, Michael, Vanessa, and Taylor have all been camping out here for the better part of a week, really digging in. And they've been a great team. It's kind of fun when you talk to each of them and you think maybe, well, they're just out helping, but they're all planners and architects and really experienced in their own right. So it's been a great team to work with. So like I said, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. Putting something on paper doesn't make it so in real life. So we still have a lot of conversations to have, and these plans that you'll see tonight are not done. They'll probably evolve and improve over time. We still have another few weeks, a few months before we adopt them officially. In May, we're due to adopt them at the council level. So if you have more input, there is still time to get that in. So thank you for being involved. It makes the project so much better. And I'll turn it over to Russ to kind of lay out what we've done so far.
So everyone on Zoom, we've got a full house here. You should come on down. No, we, all joking aside, we didn't know what to expect when we planned this, and we thought we could fill this, or we could all be at home on Zoom. So I'm pleased to see some of you here in person, and I know there's a lot online. This has been a bit of an experiment for everyone involved. I think in the several decades I've been doing this, we've never had to bring a community together both in person and virtually. And I want to thank everyone for hanging in there and being so helpful and participating. We've had, like Dan said, just so many folks come into this process. Usually when we have these sort of focus groups, we want to go really deep on something, we get 10 or 15 or 20 people come to the table, but we had well over 60 people in some of those meetings. So just the amount of input we've gotten over the last week has been tremendous. So I want to thank everyone for that. And before we get started, this is kind of a draft. What we like to do with everyone is really squeeze out as much creativity as we can from everyone over the course of this week. Blue sky thinking, constraints, you can't do that because of this. Just trying to get everything out there and on the wall. And if you've been down to town hall, you've seen that we kind of literally have everything on the wall. So what happens next is we get your feedback tonight and online, and then over the next 3-4 weeks, we'll probably get more feedback. And then we go into, okay, well, what is really the highest priorities? And how can we start to think about how implementation happens? So tonight is really about the sort of finish of the big design drafting and sort of ideation of this. And now we get into really sort of saying, is that what we want or is that not what we want? So, it started with these ideas about how to make really quick improvements. And that's important for us because it starts to understand how your regulations work, how your businesses work together, and just the idea of putting a little bit of seating on Main Street taught us so much about all the things that are broken, but also about all the great things you have in your community, mostly the people. And I think that's the biggest part for us is how do we mobilize everyone together to move forward building your town? And it's this idea of building town, that towns are never finished. They're always changing. They're always evolving. So it's kind of our collective responsibility to establish a vision and then sort of continue to move forward. So bringing people together is as much of this process as anything. And this might not be the prettiest parklet, but it worked. People liked it. And it was the idea of let's try and experiment together and see what happens. So that I think it sort of opens your mind to the idea of change, and that downtown is it's a living place. It adapts, it changes over time, and it could be a place for everyone. So for us, it was sort of how can we establish a framework for you all that aligns with your values, and create a place downtown for young and old together. So, like Dan said, a lot of people have been helping over the course of this past year, including we're borrowing pickup trucks right now to bring these boards over. And just for everyone online, the stuff that we have in the physical world here is also on the Miro board that you can get access to on the website. So that you should be able to see that digitally. And everything we've been doing has really been driven by the values that you all sort of told us about, talked about, have kind of emerged as this lattice work of critical things you wanted downtown to do and feel like in the future. So we've kind of structured this as as sort of the 7 principles for downtown Freeport. The first is you want to be a New England village center. And I think every one of us probably has a different view or different picture in their mind about what that is. So, we always look back because, for some odd reason, people have solved a lot of this stuff over and over again. And it's best for us to kind of figure out, well, what did they solve and what can we learn? And, I think it's one of these things where, the big buildings, Freeport had big mill buildings, and taller structures and sort of a variety of architecture that to a large degree has been lost. So when we sort of looking forward now, it's sort of like, well, how can we actually hang on to that heritage if different types of buildings are going to come to downtown Freeport in the future? So when we kind of flew over this part of town and really started to look at, this is sort of Depot Street here. And this is Freeport Village Station. And we heard a lot of input about everything from vacancies to, sort of, the friendliness of parking down here and having to walk up the hill to do stuff on Main Street. So we thought this is a catalyst site, someplace that actually could start changing sooner than later. It was important for us to start to look at the vision. And of course, you've got your train station here, which not very many communities have that. You're in a unique position to really take advantage of that rail access and in addition to your bus network. So this is looking at it with north up now, and just sort of so you can see the differences here. So what happens in 20 years or 30 years or a generation from now? And how can you start to create a walkable neighborhood downtown and that has a variety of uses rather than just a majority of retail? So this might be what could build out there, a variety of types of buildings that could all range, I'll go back. This is not really taking down any existing buildings. The only building we've taken down, and we'll talk about that a little later, is this building here. But essentially, we've just filled in surface parking lots. This is the retention basin that's between two parking lots now that we've turned into a structured wetland that could be also double as a park. We've rationalized the sort of intersection here so that when you come out of the station, you actually arrive at a station square with a possible fountain. And we put the skateboard park here because it seemed to work well there last summer. But the idea here is that this could be a real arrival point. And you already have this very iconic hose tower there as well. So you sort of have this really interesting anchor that starts to connect you up to Main Street. And then we've lined both sides of this street now with structures so that you actually get front doors and possibly people living on the street. And then Depot Street could become a sort of fabulous residential street with these stoops and front porches, tree-lined street parking, and something that people could stroll along as they go into town or walking around town. Now, the reality of kind of building residential in this area is, what do you do with the surface parking? So a number of these buildings will probably have their own parking, whether it's tucked under or it's behind, or you could start to develop more structured parking that is lined with things that are either residential or other things that contribute to your downtown. And that's an expensive endeavor. So, as we're looking way long-term, that might be later phases, because we think you have enough parking right now that you could share those uses over time and that things can evolve. And eventually you might need to provide some infrastructure that actually is oriented towards the transportation system like this garage. So this is sort of one sort of section of Depot Street. The other thing we've done here is there's a sort of right of way, a little sort of easement that could actually create this central sort of plaza or central performance space, outdoor performance space that Meeting House could program or partner with. And this connects Depot Street through for pedestrians and could create a new venue for the performing arts in downtown. And this sort of anchors this sort of idea that you have these interconnected courtyards throughout downtown, going up to Discovery Green. And then this also connects over into Town Hall, which could be rationalized as a real sort of wilderness park. And that sort of connects to the heritage of that building being a school. And then we've kind of put a carousel here to kind of reinforce this sort of orientation towards the youth, and kind of connection down to a new Southern Town Park. This is sort of another town green that could integrate very well with the fire depot here, the life safety building. And this sort of gets to the idea of, as you come in from the south, downtown needs to have a front door. It needs to have a welcoming threshold that transitions from the highway into you're in town. So this is a tree-lined boulevard where you could have additional public art possibilities that opens up to this new town green and potentially some new mixed use or residential buildings. And then it transitions into the sort of Main Street character of downtown with more storefronts. So this is a real nice kind of crescendo where you're sort of opening up to the highway, slowing vehicles down, welcoming people into downtown. And then how do you pull that together is something that has to do with making sure that the character of this place when it's done is still part of downtown. And there's lots of types of ways to do that. And we think that you should open up your ordinance, your zoning, and start to look at that in much more detail. Perhaps rewrite it entirely to start to talk about the types of buildings that you need downtown to do this. Because I think there's a character to Freeport that you all love. Your zoning needs to produce buildings that is in line with that. And these are live-work buildings, townhouses. These are apartment houses and duplexes and triplexes and sixplexes. These are all unclear right now. If a developer could come in and build these scale of buildings, it's unclear if they can. And I think it's something that you have to have intention around in your zoning to say, you can do this. This is what we'd like you to do. And these types of buildings are all New England. You know, you have a palette of these buildings in your history with the mill buildings and the factory buildings, but also, you know, throughout the region that you can pull from to start to talk about how can different types of buildings bring together and not lose the character of Freeport. So these all have very clear metrics and standards that could be put into your zoning to ensure that your zoning code is lined up with the vision that you all are establishing now. And, you know, this is, you know, these are just, you know, there's probably, I think we've counted 17 different building types, you know, in Maine and kind of throughout the different towns and villages in the state. And then the other thing about character is giving some definition to what that is. You know, ambiguity in design review means that as board members change or as opinions change, your character is going to change too. The character of your town is right now in the hands of a number of very passionate people on these boards and your guidelines, but your guidelines have some ambiguity. So there's things like doors and windows that it could be made very clear. And there's other things like dormers or porches or storefronts. These elements in the zoning that you have clear guidance on could then sort of establish a sort of much higher baseline for the types of projects that you have coming into your community. And we see this a lot. These are called pattern books. These, you know, this was sort of a living tradition 100 years ago where you could buy a really great building off the shelf from Sears. But the idea that let's establish what is great about the character and start to give clear guidance to the development community, to your boards, to your planning board, your design review board, and others, so that the level of quality that you're getting in your buildings in the future is higher and more predictable. And why do you do that? Because, you know, a lot of us had a lot of conversations the last couple of days about small, medium, large buildings and how do you do that? And we wanted to kind of show what something might look like on Depot Street to get your reaction to it. You know, and this is sort of a combination of the small and large put together. And why did we do that? We started to think about, well, the small, everyone liked the variety of scale, the thinness to the buildings, the front porches, the stoops, this sort of variety on the street. But when we were looking at the economics of how, you know, how it's working right now in the market, which, you know, there's cycles in real estate, but it's tending towards the large. So that's a sort of tension that we're seeing. People want to be able to, you know, build 60 units at a time, where the small is building 4, 5, 10, 20 at a time. So how do we actually develop a character that's sympathetic and part of your larger pattern in downtown, but is aligned with a vision that makes it feasible? So this is thinking about Depot Street really as a residential street with lush landscaping, tree canopy, and someplace that people would like to walk into town on. So we talked about why downtown, why we started all of this, and it was this issue of vacancy, this issue of what's going on with national retail, and the sort of strategy you've had as a downtown, as a shopping destination, and how do you start to become something else? And so, you know, looking at the vacancy, and we showed this map earlier this week, but just sort of understanding what are some of the concerns and what are some of the issues that can be controlled, both at the town level, at the individual property level, and then I guess at the community level. And that's where I'd like to sort of just remind everyone that, you know, buying local and shopping local and coming to downtown and talking to the merchants and the property owners is part of a responsibility of being a resident of town and being a member of the community. And I think this is really important because, you know, if you're telling everyone that you really need this type of store and you're talking about it, that's going to spread. And that sort of human conversation about what people want in town can start to affect how things change. And I think that's, you know, that's important because, you know, some of these landlords are just trying to rent space. And it's very difficult right now. Your vacancy has gone down, but it's still, if you could deliver some ideas and say, well, go talk to this restaurateur or his, this cafe or these types of things, sparking these conversations and this buzz around how downtown really wants to be a place that's unique starts to help sort of create that. And you need to do that because right now the frontage, all of the sort of quality storefront experience right now needs to improve. And I think that's where not just vacant storefronts, but how do you make buildings more friendly to the public life of downtown? So we started, kind of talking about this, a number of months ago with CVS really functioning as your corner store, your soda fountain. And the thought was, let's make sure it's comfortable and it's pleasing to the outdoors and to the people walking up and down that street. And that's sort of an idea that we want everyone to kind of remember, this idea that you can just stroll through downtown. So we started thinking about how do you actually do this? And this is sort of a complex thing that we wanted to try and diagram for everyone. But so right now we're sort of working with the town of Freeport, working with all the various sort of entities that are connected to the town of Freeport. And I'm still not clear who's responsible for helping lease downtown. So there's a communication issue between all of your various departments and your various organizations, and they're all incredibly energized about helping downtown. But I think what has to happen is and we just called it Be Freeport. It's this idea that Visit Freeport is for people from out away. You need something else that's for the people who are here, who are being in the community and part of it. So we just said that, okay, there's some type of structure that needs to be established that can recruit new tenants for downtown, can program the various spaces around downtown, and can communicate with all these other partners, both LLBs, the other merchants, the other entities and organizations in town that are also doing programming, so that there is a unified network of what's going on and where we want to go in downtown. And this could be funded through a business improvement district or some other type of structure so that this can help move everything forward. So why do you want to do that? Well, a lot of folks said, our signage ordinance needs to change, and that there's sort of these little things in downtown that are sort of thorny issues. And I think having an organization that is looking at the long-term vision and helping move all of the various businesses, property owners together around the sort of strategy to improve the Main Street experience could help make these little changes more feasible. And I think the organizations that have been involved are still very passionate about it, but it's not their single job. And I think that's the difference, is you need someone who's thinking about Main Street and thinking about downtown every single day. So why do you do that? So this is another kind of bubble diagram. And this is a complex issue that we've spent time sort of talking to a number of you about, but it's the idea that public life, what we've been calling a street to stroll on, that public life sort of feeds our soul. It's, we want to stroll down the street, see what's going on. And there's great streets all over the world that this happens. You just sort of walk, well, what are you doing on Saturday? I'm going to go walk Main Street and see what's going on. So that type of environment, that creates a lot of other opportunities. When you do not have one of those, though, then you're not exposed to these opportunities. The first one, though, is that, okay, if you have a street to stroll on, businesses might want to locate here, right? You're a popular place. Now, what you've been having happen is national tenants have been the tenants du jour. Those are the tenants that people have been recruiting. And we think a lot of the landlords, are shifting this because of all of the things that are happening in retail. But if you want local businesses, you've got to make sure that they're recruited, because local businesses are harder to deal with than national tenants. National tenants are creditworthy. National tenants have their own leasing brokers. It's a very transactional thing that lots of real estate people are experienced with. Local retailers are not. They're worried about making their cupcakes, and they know nothing about fitting out a store. So you need to have someone to help sort of bring them into the main street, help them deal with the issues of space, help them deal with the issues of leasing. So you have to actually actively do that. And that's where the sort of B Freeport organization comes in. Once you've sort of established that, then it's like, well, why do the landlords actually want to lease to those local businesses? I've got 5,000 square feet. I just want to find a 5,000 square foot tenant my bank will be happy with. I want them to pay the rent every month. And it's a very sort of simple thing when you're dealing with national retailer. And I'm being a little bit facetious here. You know, these are all very complex, but it's the idea that if I want to get local retail, it might be 1,000 square foot tenants instead of that 5,000 square foot tenant. So now I'm dealing with 5 separate tenants, 5 separate businesses, 5 separate operators. None of them might be credit worthy. The complexity of that from the sort of operating standpoint is difficult. So how can we help move the tide where that's the preferred way of doing business in downtown, because it actually starts to make things downtown work even better. Instead of, you know, a 60-foot wide storefront with 1 tenant, you've got 3 tenants, each in smaller storefronts. So you have the variety and the sort of aspects of the quality in Main Street start to change. And this goes back to needing, okay, so if the landlords are on board and they actually can start to address those issues of they might not be credit worthy, they might not have operating capital, it might be other ways to structure it. So the preferred way to go is with local tenants in downtown. Then it's sort of making sure that your placemaking, you're actually programming those spaces. And LL Bean does a fabulous job. You know, the Visit Freeport does a fabulous job. The events you have downtown is great. I'm just challenging you to do more of them at the same time that are coordinated, so that the net effect of that is even more. Because if every 4th storefront someone walks by, they can only see in Freeport, they're saying, well, that's really interesting. I see a lot of unique stuff in Freeport. If every 10th storefront is something you only see in Freeport, then it might not be that memorable. So I think you need to start to think about how the number of storefronts you see in Freeport that's unique is higher. Is it every 3rd storefront you walk by? Is it every 4th storefront you walk by? What we've sort of seen over the years is that it's a 3rd local, a 3rd regional, and a 3rd national. That's sort of a mix you want. And why? Every 4th storefront is something new. You get this sort of variety that happens. So, and then there has to be a feedback loop. The residents have to help. They've got to go to the restaurants. They've got to buy their Christmas presents there. They've got to do things in downtown. And a lot of you have told us, oh, I don't go downtown in the summer. Well, that's a bummer, and we have to fix that. Because if you want local retail, locals have to shop there. So there's got to be a feedback loop that keeps this going. And the residents then tell friends, and their friends come to the street to go for a stroll. And this whole thing goes and goes and goes. So you need to start that flywheel, because right now you don't have it. You know, just anecdotally, the handful of conversations we've had over the last few days, it's difficult to open a store. It's difficult to open a restaurant. It's not difficult, it's mind-numbingly difficult. So you have to change that, because you're not going to get local retail just saying you need local retail. So, you know, that's sort of at a high level the strategy. There's a lot of other sort of tactical things we have to do, both with, you know, permit review, zoning, sort of the process administering around that, and then how to liaise with the landlords to make sure that they're actually supporting this whole effort. And what does that look like? You know, and this is sort of a lot of these are very painterly sketches, but you walk around Freeport Village Station, and this is something that the town contribute a lot to make happen, both financially with their TIF, as well as just allowing this type of really suburban style mall come into downtown. So what does it do? You know, can you take out the kiosk that's blocking the view in the center? Can you retrofit all of these 1-story businesses into fabulous small independent restaurants? Because there's nothing above it. You can put a vent in very easy. These are just warehouses. So they're kind of a blank canvas. It's just the will to sort of say a leasing strategy around making this the local food scene for the region needs to have some energy behind it. And then it can be as simple as, you know, having 20-foot restaurants, and you have 10 new restaurants in downtown, that are being fit out in what are essentially warehouses right now. And then you start to, this starts to create a buzz, and now the rest of this center will fill up because there's a destination there. And you already have, they're open to experimentation. The makers market that went in last summer, this is sort of a tenant, a landlord that's willing to experiment. So how can we start to talk about what can happen to these really very simple buildings? This is all sort of faux. All of this, the proportions of this is all wrong. So you look at that storefront. It's just opening that up. So in the summer, you could have a fabulous space inside with just a bigger window. It's little things like this that could just tweak these sort of storefronts to make them more attractive to more interesting businesses. So downtown, if downtown's a happening place, you have to leverage how downtown can connect to your natural resources. A lot of people told us, well, people come to Freeport before they go out to the outdoors in Maine. They kind of come here, they load up, and then they go do something. So, thinking about that, how do you bring the outdoors right into downtown? And we started kind of looking at the sort of experience of Memorial Park. And a lot of you told us, there's these corridors that come into downtown that connect to other places. And some of you said, I would ride 7 minutes downtown, but I don't because I'm scared because the cars are moving too fast. Or I'd let my daughter ride downtown to school. It's a 7 or 10 minute ride, but I don't want her to do because it's not safe. So there's this idea that downtown could be a 15-minute walk from the center of town. That downtown is much bigger and it has the potential to be a much more vibrant place if people could come downtown. And part of that, I think, is opening up this idea that you have these outdoor destinations in downtown that you may not be using to their full potential. So this is Memorial Park, and then you have another, and then you have Gorham Park right here. So you have these sort of, green spaces that just need to be connected together. And this is the small dog park, and this is the large dog park, and this is the sort of greenway that connects these together. And then you can kind of connect up to there and head down to the river, and you start to connect these trail systems that might not be in the woods. They're trail systems right in downtown. And then we redo the Bow Street, so it brings you right into the center of town. And then this is sort of an overlap between enjoying the outdoors and embracing your arts. This is a simple bandstand, a classic New England bandstand that's on, that you can see as you come into town. And thinking about how this park could be better utilized. This is outdoor bocce court or pickleball court here. And the idea that, bandstand with a place to hang out and listen to shows or watch a movie, that this park is a natural resource, an outdoor space that could be better utilized in town right now. We were meeting with some tenants over here, some businesses, and they said, oh, it'd be great if you put a park right across the street. And we thought, guys, there's a park 200 feet away. So there's this idea that people don't even know about the parks that you have downtown. So, we mapped all of them so you can, so everyone knows where they are now. And it's this idea that this network, this is what we showed the other night. And there's these new connections that have emerged in the literally last 24 hours. And I think as we start to build this network of open spaces from the very small tweaks about just, where do we want to prioritize putting in street trees, and how do we tie things together? That will then be informed by this much bigger network of trails that extends out into the neighborhoods, into Hedgehog, or down to all of the sort of natural wonders that are around Freeport. And this idea is sort of, we talked about a little bit earlier, is this idea of these new center block experiences that are connected. We've seen 2 of them now. We know that this one is already fabulous. So how can we start to develop these sort of cross weaves, these sort of green spaces that weave through downtown that are all interconnected through tree canopies or little linear parks. And that starts to connect out into the larger trail system and cycle system. And then, I've heard this from a number of you. Where's LL Bean? I'm here to go to LL Bean. I'm in downtown. And they could be standing right in front of it. They don't know it's right there. So there's this idea that wayfinding and just getting around has to be fixed, but it's not just signage. Signage is a helpful thing. That's something that is convenient, but that has to be sort of a background element. landmarks. The idea that when you orient yourself traveling through downtown, there are these picturesque moments that you say, oh, go down there to that square and then turn right, and that'll take you to where you want to go. There's these things that the community can do that are architectural and civic in nature around orienting you to downtown. It's not just about signage and good lighting. That is something that comes in addition. No amount of signage, you've tried all this. I think it's sort of, it has to be part of an integrated approach to placemaking in downtown. And then it's about access. A woman shared this with us in one of the focus groups. This is the access map in Seattle that rates every face of every block about its ability for different folks to travel along. It's a fabulous tool. Why don't you have this tool for Freeport? Not just for downtown, but for the trail systems and the bicycling trails and all the things that could support both your young folks and your old folks and all abilities, so that they're informed about, well, how do I get outside and how can I get to a trail that I know I can feel comfortable doing? And we sort of thought, there's these trail systems maps. So this could integrate and bring everyone to downtown. That's the trailhead. And that this map is sort of about all the people in Freeport coming together around this. Then you sort of talked about how to bring nature to both the wellness side of being outdoors, not just going for a hike or going for a bike ride or a kayak or, but how do we bring food and sort of bring that food system to light and have more community gardens in town. And this sort of got us thinking that that's great for 3 or 4 months out of the year. What happens the rest of the year? So we want to challenge Freeport to start to think about themselves as a 12 months a year place that enjoys the outdoors. And I think with the pandemic, we've all experienced more and more of this, but I think it's looking to other places like Canada and other parts of Northern Europe, where you see these wonderful things happening year round. These wonderful sort of art pieces, these wonderful sort of experiences that are in -10-degree weather, and it's sort of this idea that we need to sort of come together to let our downtown thrive year round. And this might have been sort of inspired by the Olympics, but the idea that you have these sports that this could occur on a square downtown. Like, it doesn't need to be outside in the sort of wilderness of the countryside. This could be something that gets installed in the new town square every winter. So the Memorial Park, this is I think a great opportunity for downtown, because it's an open space that we've heard from you needs more love and needs more care and more potential. So this is the sort of Saturday afternoon dance, with the bandstand and the the sort of local musicians, and this is something simple that could happen right now. This is something the town controls. It's it's something I'm sure you could. This is maybe a fairly neoclassical inspired bandstand, but I'm sure you could figure out how to try this, just like you tried the parklet and the hot dog vendor and the try these things, see if that's in the right spot, see if it's big enough, does it need to be smaller. And then you could start to kind of organize around these activities and figure out what else needs to go in this park. And that has to do with making sure you're motivating everyone together, because the community is the one who's going to actually make downtown and make Freeport in general more sustainable and more about the sort of addressing the climate challenges. So thinking about that in more detail, we just can't help but look at all these parking lots and all the sort of fossil fuels and all the sort of single occupant vehicles and all the sort of transportation systems that Freeport has sort of fallen into, just like a lot of other towns have. And we think that you actually have these great bones, these great streets and these historic buildings, that you could start to pivot away from that system and create a more sustainable environment where walking is the default. And you start to think about your transportation system much more holistically, meaning that rather than driving over here tonight, we all should have walked. That idea that walking and biking is more convenient, not because it's more environmentally friendly, but just as humans, we're lazy. It's just more convenient to walk down there than to get in the car. So there's this idea that our built environment has to sort of, directly align with our values. And your values over the years has been, we need to have parking as close as possible to the store at the expense of our downtown's community. And I think that you've told us that needs to change. So this is a sort of build out, kind of illustrative vision for this section of town. And we've talked about, you sort of just to orient everyone, this is Meeting House. This is the sort of, the sort of parking plaza that could park, when nothing's going on, but then they could have a great outdoor show in the summer. And this idea that, pulling together a cultural district here, a kind of cultural market district, with the Preservation Society and their courtyard, with what ACAF and Meeting House is doing, what the lawn in front of Town Hall could be doing. This could actually connect to some town property and pull together the school into this as well. So we have a linear park coming through here. And this is a market hall. This is where you have your farmer's market outside, your antique market, your car show, your boat show, your outdoor paraphernalia show. This is a shed that has solar panels out on top of it. So you see all these solar panels going, in parking lots and all. Well, don't just put the solar panels up. Put something that you can do other things under when you put the solar panels on. And that sort of anchors this area with enclosing it with new buildings. So you have a little market district here that, the Preservation Society has a parking lot out back that they may not need. Well, that's a sort of, possible redevelopment site. The town has some land here that they could build a parking facility to start to allow more smaller incremental development to occur. Smaller buildings that might not be able to have their own parking could go here. So you have a park once idea that the town starts to facilitate around that. Where, if you want to build a 12-unit apartment, but you don't want to build parking because you might not be able to afford structured parking, well, here's a parking bank that could serve a lot of buildings downtown. And then this is lined, and this was not our idea. Someone brought this up in one of the focus groups. I thought it was incredible. It's a vertical farm. It's this idea that this parking lot could become the sort of, keystone for your position on sustainability. That downtown is about productive food, it's about productive markets, it's about people improving the environment. And it could have these fabulous spaces that in the summer it might look like this, or in the winter or off season, it could be parking too, just with solar on the roof being productive. And this is the example that someone shared the other day about the vertical farm. And this is, a lot of people line these parking structures with residential, other uses. But I thought this was really interesting because it's, it's something that, at night, it just glows. It looks fabulous with all the greenery in it. And, and then start to think about how you can use the other facilities you have in town complementary, so that the winter might still be here and the summer might be somewhere else, and vice versa. And then thinking about your zoning around embracing community. And this was the idea of, thinking about not just your parking lots, but your other roads around downtown, starting to be more in line with a sustainable place and be more people oriented so that you can start to have a more resilient type of approach to things. And there's lots of frameworks for this. Someone said, well, can we have some net zero buildings? And we think that's an aspirational goal. You've got to start to step up to that, where that if you want net zero in downtown and you want to be a net zero community, there are lots of other frameworks, around how to start to build a plan for sustainability and to address climate change that might have net zero as part of it. And I think that's the sort of holistic view. Downtown could start that, and then that could expand and build to larger places around the community. So when you look at this street, you start to think about how can downtown really be a sustainable place? You start to say, well, you have to have these sort of, these opportunities where you've got, you're taking something that was not sustainable and turning it into something that is sustainable, and your values are out there in the physical world. So you have, this market district that could also be parking underneath, but it's also solar producing power for downtown. And you've got your centralized sort of park once facility that's also producing food for all the restaurants downtown. And you can start to think about how you can make a more sustainable place with the facilities that you may already need in downtown to begin with. So then you start to think, okay, well, how can we support not just the sustainable aspects of town, but also the arts and culture? So looking at the sort of area to the south, we started thinking more and more about how town, when you're coming into downtown, it really needs to start, you start to have this opening, welcoming moment here, not when you get to here. So, looking at these areas in more detail, we wanted to sort of build on this sort of rationalization of this block, and that the fire station and the idea of how the arts integrate with everything has to begin with this sort of cultural center as well. And that the public art that can be outside has to sort of be coordinated with inside as well. So, you've told us a lot about this, and I think it's sort of the idea that bringing the arts out into all of downtown and anchoring it with some of your institutions, the sort of meeting house, sort of the idea of a cultural sort of district in downtown. And then that you should be working with the arts community to establish other locations that public art can be either programmed or could be leased and brought in for a semi-annual or annual basis, and that you start to embrace art throughout downtown in a very productive way. And this can happen with very little funding. This is a temporary stage our office did a number of years ago that was designed to move around, and it's moved several places in this town. And it just has 2 people that program it and set up the speakers, and they've created this festival nature here, where 4 or 5 years ago, when this stage didn't exist, they didn't have a music scene in this town, and now they do. So and then the idea that art can be very small. Lots of places have these paint the boxes programs, but it can start with very little and bringing the community together. And what we've heard is that you have a robust artist network emerging from around the region, around your town, that are very talented, but they're just not necessarily well seen in downtown. So it's a communication problem, as well as making sure people are getting into Meeting House and into the galleries that are now in downtown. And then it's sort of making sure that the art is for everyone, and kind of creating art programs and art experiences even more so for folks coming in and around downtown. And then involving the kids. It came up during our conversation about how do we get the teachers involved? And the mention that the teachers are very overworked and have a lot going on. So it should be flipped around the other ways. How can downtown help the teachers? How can downtown be a place that when kids come and go from school, they're learning about the importance of art just by the nature of the character of downtown? Look at that brand new sculpture that just went in. And then the art teacher can talk about it in class. And sort of starting to create an environment that opens up children's ideas to being curious about art and being curious about culture and being curious about performing and all of these things. So that opens up this idea. We have to make downtown about everyone and every ability. So we showed this video, and I'm showing it again for folks online who maybe didn't see it, but the idea that when you start to think about how people access their environment, we've designed our streets, and to a certain degree, our kind of way we get around towns and main streets, we've designed it in a way that's very limiting. And I think if you slow everything down in these places, you can actually have these fabulous sort of dance. Look at the little kid popping up. There's sort of this idea that if you can change the public realm to support this sort of dance of downtown, just through good streetscape design or good urban design elements, that then you can create a very pleasing place to hang out, and you can create this sense of wonderment that would inspire and not only be a nice place to spend time in, but also be universally accessible for folks with all abilities. So, this idea kind of emerged as sort of a way to start to think about the streets in downtown, in particular Main Street. And I think looking at the sort of conditions today, and we need someone to help solve us. Which way did the masts come into town? Do they come in this way and turn the corner, or do they come in this way and turn the corner? So the idea that this intersection has a really interesting heritage, and that it was a kind of meeting place. This is where the stagecoaches stopped. Where the sort of that was the center of town for for a long time. So the idea here is that really start to think about how to improve the design of the street on Main Street so that it feels more like a place for people and less like places for cars to move through. And then along those same lines, if you're going to slow everything down in town and you want to create that as a sort of this dance of public space, how do you tell people that's what you should be doing? So when you're coming into town now, this is sort of, you're still on the highway, and maybe you're starting to feel like you're in some place that you should slow down and pay attention to pedestrians and cyclists. And we think town should actually start, being in downtown should start up here. And we think it should because, working with some of your cycling and trail advocates and the Complete Streets Committee, they reminded us that this bridge, might be getting a 12-foot wide multi-use path on it, and design starting this year. So this is a great opportunity for your community to start to rethink this whole section of downtown. So this was a sketch we showed a couple of days ago about creating this boulevard, this wonderful sort of parkway coming into town. That would be this amazing sort of place that opens up downtown to going out into the countryside, and then also welcomes people into downtown with this wonderful urban canopy of trees and sort of promenade. So we've sort of done another pass at this, which is really sort of putting this multi-use path on the same side as the bridge, thinking about how existing buildings can work with new buildings, thinking about how shortcuts for locals can be created. There could be the potential for several shortcuts so that you can kind of sneak into town from the back roads. And then the idea that this could be a series of really fabulous structures that have these great grand front porches that sort of open up down to town into the parts north and northwest. And then this is what we call a triangle about. There's no traffic signals there. And this is something we want to kind of work with your town engineer and others on, is sort of, can this intersection actually be a really important place that people slow down and realize, wow, I'm in Freeport now. So actually you come in and you kind of can go around. And if you want to take a left, you come in, you go around and go up. So it's this idea that it's a very slow moving, very free moving intersection. So rather than having, when the lights go out and you have a stops, a blinking red, we find when we talk to a lot of traffic engineers is that sometimes more traffic moves through because everyone's slowing down and looking at each other rather than sitting at the light and waiting and sitting at the light and waiting. So we want to start to think about how this can not only be a functional intersection that's slow moving, that moves the 20,000 vehicles in the summertime around, but is also an intersection that signals to everyone that they should be behaving like they're in downtown Freeport. So there's a lot of other areas that you've told us, and this is sort of a bubble diagram of the sort of octopus arms, like reaching out from downtown. We've looked at this one, but if we can look at just one, there's probably 4 others at least that could have more interesting or unique treatments to them, and it could just be a nice bike path. But the idea that downtown reaches out and welcomes folks who want to come into downtown in a very unique and very Freeport way, making it safe for cyclists and runners and pedestrians as well. And this is sort of a more sort of out of town treatment for how you can have a cycling infrastructure added into some of these more country roads. And and your Main Street has evolved significantly over time. If you look at this, it's sort of an interesting, the intersection here, Bow, but look at that tree canopy. Look at the sort of, the kind of natural wonder that happens on your streets in downtown. And some of you mentioned, the sort of, the history of that and and how it evolved. But it's sort of this idea that, the downtown, your streets had a lot of different character over the years. The trolley tracks, coming straight down. So for us, it's sort of like, how can we sort of peel back the highway from downtown and think about what kind of people street you want down on your main street. This was a sketch we showed the other night about sort of a universal treatment, sort of the universal street design where, if you're in a wheelchair, you can sort of stroll right across, all of the cars are moving, 10 miles per hour. If I'm shopping and I want to go from one side to the other, I can crisscross safely. That driver is going slow enough to see that child on their bike. This idea that there's this sort of dance of human beings on the street, not necessarily a car, a truck, a bike, it's human beings. And that idea is that if we can knit together all the natural places you have with your downtown in a way that's comfortable for humans, then you get these great town-wide events. This is the Beltline in Atlanta, which is an old railroad right away, that they knitted together all these neighborhoods in Atlanta like they'd never been before. And all of this sort of cultural happenings now occur that 10 or 15 years ago, no one even thought about, no one even could imagine. And it was because of this interplay of the natural and the built world and making sure that there was connection between all of those. And you get these wonderful experiences now in those parts of those neighborhoods where, this is not even on a street. This is the Beltline, the sort of linear park below. You get these little cafes and these new residences being built on this. And you've told us that you want to have a more integrated transportation system, a mobility network, bike shares. The idea that, could you ride your bike? Would you ride your bike if you could get a bike in any of these places? And it's the idea that, can we start to think about Freeport as a place you could travel around without a car? If you choose to, you could get around without a car. And there's lots of examples of communities around the country doing this now, and having fun with it, making sure that this is something that also extends your values around it and connects to the arts. Some of these are more whimsical than others, but some of these are more space age than others. But the idea is that you can start to think about mobility as something that connects to all sorts of other areas of downtown. And then the idea that you need to connect into your region's transportation network. The idea that Zipcar, people might come to Freeport and connect into Freeport if there's opportunity for transportation choices like Zipcar. Someone might take the train up here, visit Freeport, and then use a Zipcar to get around the region that otherwise might not ever come up here. So the idea that you have to start to think about sort of layering on these different transportation solutions, just like you want to layer on all the different events downtown. So you get this compounding improvement. And then thinking about how all this comes together and makes downtown better. And it's the idea that when you come into town, you need to arrive at a place that is comfortable and pleasing to the public life there. And in this image, this sort of sketch was starting to think about how Bow Street could go from sort of a difficult street to walk down because of the slope to something that people actually want to sit on benches and enjoy and sort of spend time there, and how it connects to Memorial Park, or how people are comfortable cycling in from out of downtown right into the center of town. And then I'm not going to pick on LL Bean, but they sure could have a better front door. I think there's this potential to solve this idea of where's LL Bean and how does LL Bean connect to the main street with just a very very sort of kind of postcard moment here. And then so downtown has to be for all, and I think, ooh, not sure what's going on, Mandy. Oh, we're loading. Okay, hold on, we're having internet lag here. For all of you out there, we've still got people in the studio finishing some of the drawings that are going on the slides, because some of the ideas came up this afternoon with a few of you visited the studio. So this is really a collaborative process. And it's just important for all of us to recognize that we really want to know, when you see this stuff for the first time, what's wrong with it? How can we improve it? Because this process is about being creative and about thinking about new ideas and how all of those ideas start to interconnect. And we love doing this work because I get to talk to all sorts of people throughout your community. And I start to hear things that each of you might have never talked to each other about. So there's this wonderful thing that happens that all of a sudden, all of that starts to form a picture in these poof moments of ideas. Like, like the Mallard Drive, like that would have never occurred to us when we first visited Freeport, that potential to reach out to the countryside and sort of create a brand new gateway moment for downtown was something that could emerge. And that's where we sort of thank all of you for your input and your thought process. So when we look at this overall illustrative plan, there's a lot of choices here that none of us are going to make, but others are going to make. And what we have to do now is sort of say, is this a compelling enough vision? And is this going in the right direction? Knowing that it's going to evolve and it's going to change. But in 20 or 30 years, are your kids going to, could they sort of squint their eyes and say, you know what, that was a really important moment back in 2022 when they said, let's do all of this. It might not look exactly like it, but it could start to sort of feel like that. So this is about, are we on the right track? Are we starting to make your Main Street sort of feel like you want it to? Is it a place that you want to spend time? And we thought we'd sort of try and show you what that might feel like. And this is a sort of work in progress, but the idea that, that your Main Street could be for people and it could still move cars and could be an inviting place. And this right now is, this is out in front of the Preservation Society. And sort of the idea that downtown could have a wonderful strolling street and be unique in the region and perhaps the Eastern Seaboard, and be able to have a place where over time, it gets better and better and better. So, with that, I really wanted to thank everyone. We're going to go out, we're going to bring the boards in. What are we in or out? They're over here. So we can all talk about this stuff now, because I know that was a lot, and we're still trying to connect all these dots and sort of weave all this together. So, we're going to be putting all this online. Most of it's already online. And we want to welcome comments for the next, I think 3 weeks probably. And then we'll be back here later this spring with the sort of next big draft of this that we'll start to have an open house and another discussion around, with the goal of having something ready to start to talk about with the town council later in May. So you can pop your phone out and grab the link to the exit survey, and everyone online should probably get a link in the chat. I'll give everyone a second. And we really want your input. A lot of this is still in draft. It's still in the sort of working phase. It's still sort of messy and wonderful in that way. So thank you, everyone. This has been fabulous. I don't know how to turn this off. There we go.
You set the bar here, now it's like, all right, let's go do it.
Right.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hope you can hear me. This is Mandy with Principal Group. If you can, please fill out the exit survey. The link was dropped in the chat, or the QR code was up on the screen for a brief moment. I will drop the link in the chat again. Please also share your comments and feedback about the presentation and the drawings and renderings on the Miro board. I will put that in the chat as well. Also, keep up to date on anything related to the downtown vision process by going to freeportdowntown.me. We will post periodically, give you updates on news and events, and you can always check back there if you're confused about something that will have the most up-to-date information. Thanks so much.